Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Powers, President of NYSCOPBA. And also Tommy Sawchuk, Executive Vice President. Hi, President Powers.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Welcome, everyone. So
Typo in the program there, Miss Tammy Sawchuk.
That's what I thought, but it says Tommy, so I apologize.
That's all right. Thank you.
Okay, so we look forward to your testimony, and if you could summarize, that would be most helpful.
Be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Co-Chairs Young and Weinstein, and esteemed members of the Joint Budget Committee. Many of you are aware I'm Michael Powers, the President of NYSCOPBA. With me is the Executive Vice President, Tammy Sawchuk, new Recording Secretary, Chris Summers, and my Treasurer, Toby Hogan. In the interest of time, I'll limit the testimony to a few critical issues for NYSCOPBA. Please refer to NYSCOPBA's submitted testimony for further explanation on all of our issues of interest. A couple of things we want to talk about are the death gamble legislation. First and foremost, we want to personally thank the legislature for passing our death gamble legislation last year. As many of you are aware, the governor vetoed this bill and failed to include it in his executive budget, and we're calling upon the legislature to introduce it and have it included in this year's executive budget. SHU, our issues. We recognized a lot of the testimony back earlier today with the acting commissioner. The governor has announced an initiative to close approximately 1,200 SHU beds throughout the system. While we fully disagree with this decision, since this initiative will not reduce the risk of violence to both inmates and staff, we feel it is imperative to at least bring some clarity to the SHU issue in New York. Inmates that are housed in secure housing units have more access to and more one-on-one contact with mental health providers, counselors, physicians, members of the facility than inmates in general confinement. Moreover, the department has instituted a pilot program in 3 facilities which allows inmates in secure housing units to secure and access, to access electronic computer tablets. This program will soon be system-wide in our SHUs. The lighting inside the cells in SHU and the dimensions of the SHU cells meet the accreditation of the American Correctional Association. In fact, the size of a secured housing unit is essentially no different than the size of a cell in general confinement, in some instances considerably larger. Inmates in these units are given the opportunity to participate in the PIMS program that allows the inmates who display proper behavior to gain privileges while inside secure housing units. Basically, in short, our concern as NYSCOPBA is that those that would have you believe that these cells resemble something out of a Hollywood film, such as the Shawshank Redemption, and making those inferences are providing disingenuous and non-factual information. And we encourage all legislators to visit a facility and go through an SHU themselves. The other issue we'd like to talk about is double bunking. For many years, NYSCOPBA has articulated our stance on the existence of double bunks within the prison system. The concentration of inmates, particularly within the medium security dorm setting, that has resulted from double bunking has created a serious safety concern for members of our organization as well as for the inmate population. Current regulations utilized by the department allow for up to 60 inmates to be housed in a medium security dorm setting. When the prison population experienced a sharp increase in the late 80s and early 90s, the overcrowding necessitated drastic action. The state revised the regulations to authorize a 20% increase in the number of inmates housed in the medium dorm setting, now allowing for 60 inmates per dorm as opposed to 50. Rather than continuing to close beds, the department should immediately take steps to address the overcrowding in medium dorms by removing double bunks and limiting the number of inmates in those dorms to 50, not 60. This all brings us back to violence. As many times in the last couple of years, those of you who have been present at past hearings know that NYSCOPBA has clearly and consistently rang the alarm about the escalating levels of violence in New York's correctional system. Regrettably, I'm here to ring that bell again. A measure that NYSCOPBA supported as a method of curbing violence and contraband was the pilot program to implement a secure vendor package program for inmate packages. Unfortunately, the DOC's unveiling of this pilot program was short-sighted, and the governor stopped the program only a few weeks into its implementation. NYSCOPBA is hopeful that the elimination of the program is merely temporary, as secure vendor programs in many states throughout our union have proven to curtail violence and limit the introduction of contraband into our facilities. As many of you may recall, NYSCOPBA entered into a memorandum of understanding in 2014 to thoroughly review the staffing needs of all 54 correctional facilities. The union and the leaders of each facility agreed on the need for security staff increases. Regrettably, only 2 years' worth of staffing increases have materialized in that 3-year MOU. Had the roughly 200 additional correctional officers properly trained and equipped been hired and deployed, we believe the increases in violence illustrated in the charts, which are in the testimony we provided to you, would not have occurred. NYSCOPBA calls on the state to allocate the necessary funding to train and provide for the agreed-to staffing levels that will make for a safer prison system. Men and women of NYSCOPBA, each of who walks the toughest beat in law enforcement, remain committed to reforming this prison system so that staff and inmates alike can operate in a safe and productive environment. We look forward to working with all of you as partners in that effort. Thank you again for the opportunity to share our views, and we'll do our best to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, President Powers. Senator Galvin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank all of you for your patience and the work that you do and of course, all of your members do. There is no question it is an extremely difficult and challenging job. For the sake of time, I won't go into some of the areas you testified about. We've talked about some of them extensively today, but I just do want to note that I did have concerns about the governor's directive with the secure vendor package program that you had expressed. We will continue to work with the commissioner to ensure the timeliness of them dealing with it and fixing the things that need to be fixed so that it can be implemented. SHU, again, we have concerns. I personally have concerns about curtailing its use, but that has been testified to, and we can talk further about that privately. Double bunking, I know that you spoke about as well. I only want to ask one question. It deals with, in a sense, with double bunking, but it could apply anywhere in a facility, and that has to do with when an emergency takes place, when there may be a fight in a dorm room, where you have one correction officer supervising 50 or 60 inmates, and I'm assuming in the evening they're alone, the doors are locked. What assistance is available to respond to an emergency, whether it's an inmate-on-inmate attack or an inmate-on-staff attack? And you can talk about the dormitory style, but you don't need to confine it to that. You can talk about other areas of facilities.
I think you'd be pretty surprised with this answer, and I'll be brief with it. On our Tour 1 facility, Tour 1 and shift in our facilities, which are 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., we have one officer supervising 60 inmates in a secured housing unit while that officer is secured inside it. Our midnight shifts are skeleton crews. In a typical single cookie cutter style setting, we have approximately 23 correction officers in the facility working the whole shift. And that, when you have a significant incident such as a fight or an incident or an assault on staff, we have limited staff to report to that area. And many times there's a compromise somewhere in the facility in that response due to the shortage of staff on that tour.
So now you talked about the staffing levels and the, I don't know if I'm quoting you correctly, a 3-year plan where 2 of the years have been implemented, and you made reference to a 3rd that hasn't been completed yet. Is that the actual study, or is that the additional staff?
We entered into a memorandum of understanding in 2014 with the department and the executive to have staffing reviews done at all 54 of our correctional facilities. And in that process, I think we've obtained 265 to date, but we're short another 206, I believe that number is. Don't quote me on it completely, but I can get it for you.
And that's from the agreed upon additional staffing level, additional
We're waiting for those 206 items to come on live right now.
All right. Could you get that to us, please?
Absolutely. Be happy.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Assemblyman Oaks.
Yes. You covered a number of issues. Appreciate you highlighting those. I know when Assemblyman Palmisano was here, he listed off a number of those things and asked those questions to the commissioner. The one thing that he recommended that I didn't hear in yours, and so I guess I'm just looking, is he talked about the use of dogs for trying to root out drugs entering facilities. Just position on that or thoughts? I'd appreciate
We're on the record with the department for a canine at every facility. You know, we've talked many times about the effectiveness of it, and it's not foolproof, but it's not to quote the acting commissioner or anything, but it would significantly reduce a lot of the contraband and, more importantly, the drugs that the dogs are trained to sniff out, and for us to be able to retrieve and take out.
So it's been recommended at this point, no action.
Well, back when we started this push with the canines, they had maybe 3 or 4.
Yes.
We're pushing 9 now, and we won't be satisfied until we have 50, 60. We'll go with 60, just round it off.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, President Powers, and everyone for all that you do. I recently visited Attica, and it's interesting to hear you talk about the system-wide violence, and they confirmed that when I was there. And so we have, based on your testimony, we have problems with not enough staffing. We have problems with double bunking, problems now with the SHUs and the closure of them. But what else is contributing toward that system-wide violence? Is there some other trend out there that is affecting the inmate population and our correction officers?
Absolutely. It's been talked about in here all day today, the secure vendor package program. Just yesterday, right, just within the last week, last night, 46 scalpel blades and 11 grams of marijuana were taken out of a green bell pepper at one of our facilities. Our package room system is in dire need of work. 4 days before that, in between 2 Pop-Tarts secured in the actual Pop-Tart package, were a dozen Suboxone strips that were to be distributed. When that exits, if we don't catch it, and it gets into the facility, the gangs take over, the territories take over, they start running the facility, they start moving the product, guys start using the product, we start dealing with the individuals that are high on the product. That's where the violence comes from.
So that program was pulled, and
It was a pilot program. Isn't that what pilot programs are for? Mm-hmm. You kind of tweak it out as you go and you work through it, and that's our concept. And we played a significant role in trying to implement this. Ultimately, the department's the management. They call the shots, but we had our say, and we won't stop until it comes back.
Thank you for that. Senator, I'm sorry.
Yes. Assemblyman Weprin. Good evening, President Powers.
Yes, good evening.
One thing you've probably found in the last year and a few months that I've been chair of this committee, we won't agree on every issue, but you always have access, and my door is always open to meet with you and your members, who I think are doing a phenomenal job under very difficult circumstances.
We appreciate it.
I agree with you on the death gamble bill. As a matter of fact, Assemblywoman Jenny and I wrote a letter to the governor asking him to include the funds in the budget, and I will still press to try to get that done. I know there's some numbers that were thrown around on how much that would cost. I think on the high side, which is really unrealistic, $14 million was cited by the state controller, but I think that would only happen if everyone who's past their retirement age passed away within a year. What do you think the actual real number, a realistic number, would be for the cost of that? It's certainly less than $14 million, in my opinion.
I would have to refer that to our legislative council and some of our, but it could potentially be a bit less. Yeah.
Could be what? I'm sorry.
You're talking about the cost of the fiscal note?
Yeah, the cost of how much it would be to implement the.
It had a 5-year sunset language in it, and I think it came in at 13.7 million. And we actually talked.
That would be on the high side, though.
That would be on the high side, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
there are obviously mechanisms in place. We could scale back to maybe 3 years. We talked about it, but you know, right now it's the proposal stands as it is. We'll reintroduce it, and we'll be working. We'll work you hard to support it again.
Okay, well, we'll work with you on it again if we can't get it in the budget, but certainly it would be a lot easier if we could get it in the budget.
Yes, yes, sir. That'd be great if we could get that done.
Thank you once again for your service and all the service of all your members.
Thank you.
Senator Savino.
Thank you. Hi, Mike. How are you? Good to see you guys. So you were here before, and you heard Commissioner Annucci talk about the budget. And I asked him the question I always ask about overtime. And he said a couple of interesting things. But one of them that stuck in my mind, and I didn't get a chance to follow up with him, was he said right now there's about 900 of your members who are out on workers' comp, and that's a problem that we need to do something about. I get the sense he thought that somehow or other we needed to reduce the number of workers' comp incidents, and I agree. But the question is there must be a reason for all of these workers' comp claims. So is it all workplace injuries?
Well, you'll see in our written testimony, a majority of them are. Yeah, without question. You'll see in the testimony where from 2014, since really the inclusion of the NYCLU settlement to today, you'll see the significant rise in violence. Not just towards staff, but towards the other inmates in the population, even some of the civilian staff. That some of that doesn't necessarily get reported as well. Right. Our civilian staff are suspect at times because they're down back and they're dealing with certain situations, and they have just as much ability to impose discipline as we do. But yeah, sure, without question. And with the rise in violence, we've got a lot more significant injuries. We've got a great deal of members that are eligible to retreat, 2,250, as I said here today. And it's becoming a much dangerous place to work, and that workers' comp numbers would surely contribute to the fact that we're working in a much more violent situation than we have in the past.
So knowing that, has the department approached you at all about trying to develop policies to reduce the level of inmate violence or violence in the prison system at all to kind of prevent this increase in workers' comp claims because of injuries?
We continually badger them for staffing, technology, other resources, to be able to combat and to be able to go back. I think I testified in here a couple of years ago that our department's significantly behind the times. And, we're working, recognizing the struggle with budget that everybody has. We continue to work, and we're asking for the sky, and, we deserve it. And quite frankly, to be able to have to work into these situations and work through them, we're constantly asking. And what, unfortunately, what we're seeing, and it's not a slight to the inmate population in any way, shape, or form, but we seem to see more catering to them and not a whole real solid conversation regarding combating and rolling back a lot of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis. Right. Our members, our front line.
And finally, I want to thank you and your members who set up that tour. I got to go along with the department to visit Sing Sing and see it up close and personal, and then also to Hudson to see where we're now housing, the 16 and 17-year-olds. It was definitely an informative experience, and I highly recommend it to the rest of my colleagues to spend the time to actually go out and see some of the jails. Good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Assemblyman Samasano.
No, it's okay. Thank you. Mr. Powers, thank you for being here. I know it's been a long day. Just a couple quick questions for you. Earlier today when we were talking about with the commissioner relative to the increase in violence for the past several years, from 2012 to 2017, the big spike in increase both on inmate on corrections officers or staff and inmate on inmate. One of the big statistics that kind of jumped out was the dramatic increase in our medium security facilities. 114 in 2012 up to 198 in 2017, almost a 75% increase. What, from your perspective, from talking to the CEOs and the people in the medium security facilities, is really has driven that increase in assaults on our corrections officers and our staff in these medium security facilities?
You've seen a significant drop in the inmate population since the amendment of the Rockefeller drug laws. And now what you have is a smaller inmate population, but a much more violent inmate population. We spoke in 2014 about the reclassification of maximum security inmates to medium security. Well, now our medium securities are running at capacity. Our maxes are running at capacity. And now you've still got the same kind of inmate, whether he's locked up behind a set of bars, or if he's in a dormitory type setting, or whether he's gang affiliated, or whatever the case may be. But listening to you earlier today, I would have to concur with you with the fact that I don't believe that it's just isolated in the maximum security prisons. There's a significant amount of violence in our max jails, but there's also a significant amount of violence in our medium facilities as well.
The issue of double bunking has come up pretty regularly in the past. I know, having toured some of the facilities in and around my district, I think we got the impression that the double bunking and double celling wasn't really a safety issue or security issue, that some of these are constructed that way. But we still know that I think over 6,000 beds in our facilities are either double bunked or double celled. Do you, from your perspective and from the perspective of the officers who work in our facilities, does this conducive of a safer environment, or is it more obviously of a disruptive environment for an issue where more violence can be fostered?
In our medium settings, in a housing unit with 60 inmates and with one officer, obviously it would not necessarily make it all that much easier, but it would be a bit easier for that officer to supervise 50 inmates than it would 60. There are currently 6,835 top bunks in classification situations. That potentially has the number to be, if you fill every one of them, you've got 13,670 inmates that can be placed in a double bunk situation. There are 2,237 top bunks and double cells statewide in the max. DOCS claims that 2,140 of these beds exist in cells that were built to accommodate double occupancy. 3,342 top bunks exist in medium and dorm room settings. The remaining 1,250 top bunks exist in maximum male jails and female. Our concern with a majority of this is if you were to take down the top bunks and move the inmate population into the vacant consolidated dorms that we have now, the 8,000 number of alleged empty beds would pretty much be eradicated, and you would have maybe 1,000 to 1,200 maybe empty beds statewide. And that would make, not necessarily easier, but it's going to create a bit of a relief for that officer who not only has to deal with potentially 30 or 22 inmates just on this back wall alone, which is approximately from us to you away in that dorm situation. So he can't see everything across the back end of that wall, he or she. So it has its issues without question, and we believe strongly that the double bunks need to come down.
Relative to some training, I want a couple quick questions, hopefully you can address as you speak. But one of the things that I've been made aware about, and a lot of us have been made aware about, is the department's policy on training security staff to administer Narcan for drug overdoses. And what's your experience on the number of drug overdoses that are going on in our facilities? We know it's a rampant drug problem, but the drug overdoses and having to train staff on administering Narcan for drugs that shouldn't even be going into the prisons in the first place, and how to spending training dollars on that, and what about the department sees from your corrections officers, addressing the training that you do need in your facilities that would be helpful to keep you safe while doing your job. I believe the acting commissioner says that, in one part of his statement was that we've seen a lot of change and it's coming fast and furious. And some of that aspect of what you talk about regarding the training is actually part of it. We're cutting corners in certain aspects of our training curriculum to bring about the Narcan. Now, the overdoses, to answer your question regarding the overdoses in many of the facilities, they're significant. And it's this K2, this synthetic marijuana that's out there, that is creating a lot of these overdoses. And this Narcan, many times, we've had as many as 17 applications applied to an overdosed inmate before he actually took to it. Flatlined, the whole 9 yards before he was brought back into
brought back to life. And you know, that training component, we constantly drive home training. And as I mentioned earlier, we're a bit behind the times, quite a bit behind the times with other areas of the country and our trade. And what we need is consistently more training, technology, and resources.
And one last question. I know the union and the department completed a mutually agreed to staffing audit statewide. And how did those results come out, and what's your thinking and impact on that? Oh, sorry about that.
We never have enough staff, quite frankly, you know, and you know, we have a lot of workplace violence incidents that occur that deplete our staff. And, you know, we're not satisfied with the staffing levels that we have in every 54 of our facilities at this point. We'll continue to advocate and push for additional staff.
Thank you for what you do and your members do for our communities. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping us safe. We appreciate you appearing today, and please keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.